we're going to be discussing German roach control in commercial service accounts, all on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here every week discussing all things pests. Welcome to the Monday edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing German roach control for commercial food service accounts. And this one is by special request by a listener of the Pest Geek Podcast. Brad Gamble requested. He's new in the industry and he's learning. He's been in it for about 18 months. And he requested this for his knowledge and growth. So thank you, Brad, for this. And we greatly appreciate it, the request. Before I go into the podcast, I just want to cover a couple things. Number one is, make sure you go ahead and join the Pest Geek Society by joining our Facebook group. We have a group, Facebook, Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group. Look for that on Facebook, and also in our website. We have a lot of things we're adding to the website. Make sure you go there, pestgeekpodcast.com, all one word, pestgeekpodcast.com. If you've got anything that you want to communicate to us, we do have a phone number that's listed on the website. Go there and get it, and you can communicate with us, leave us a message. If you want to join the Pest Geek Podcast, we have a new selection here for listeners that want to be correspondents in the field. And if you want to submit something to us, whether it's a video, whether it's an audio file, something that you want to share with the Pest Geek Society, go ahead. We also have a YouTube channel. Go ahead and check out the YouTube channel. Look for Pest Geek Podcast on YouTube. And there we're going to be uploading videos from different companies all around the country. Sharing their experiences, their thoughts, promoting them as an individual. We want to be able to promote the small pest control business. As a matter of fact, I got here in my office a great news by a listener of the podcast that posted this on another group, but he's a listener, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. This is a new product coming out, Ecovia MT mosquito treatment, and it's a brand new product specifically designed for mosquito control to add to your 25B services. It is a natural product made by Rockwell Labs, and this one was posted by Michael James Burke of Eco Pest Solutions LLC in Cleveland, Tennessee. So thank you, Michael, for that info, for that intel. This product is not actually on the market. It's going to be announced sometime this week, introduced. Rockwell has not released it. It's not even on their website, but we thought we'd release it here first and let you know about it. Of course, we have the most intelligent people in the world communicating with us. So thank you, Michael, for being awesome. Eco Pest Solutions in Cleveland, Tennessee. If you're out there and you've got a business and you need a great pest control technician in that area, give him a call and get in contact with him. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your help. And now we're going to get on to a German roach control in commercial food service accounts. And this has been something that I've done a lot of in the past. We've done a lot of clean outs for food service. A lot of people don't like doing food service. Food service is really a difficult thing to do, especially if you are a general household pest technician and you want to get into commercial. Unless you're one of those guys that is going to dive in head first and you have a ton of experience in doing commercial and doing a lot of just roach control, a lot of heavy clean outs. You've been in the business a long time. It's one of those things that most people that jump in it want to jump right back out because it is difficult. I mean, it is about 3 times more difficult to do than residential roach cleanouts. And because there's a lot of mitigating factors in food service accounts that you do not have the dynamics that you do not have in a multi-unit apartment complex with multiple units and having constant roach problems, because of the way it's being handled or the way the service is being done. Commercial food service is much more difficult. It is a challenge. And the problem with commercial food kitchen, in most places, around the country and around the world is, the people aren't really willing to pay for what it really needs to be done to get that under control. And they're not willing to pay not only just in dollars. In most cases, the German roach service for a restaurant is the same as if you were doing it in a home. Yet you're doing 3 times more the work, 3 times more the vigilance. It is very difficult to do. And the other part is that in cost, they're not really to really do what it takes to make sure that problem doesn't happen again. Dealing with individual restaurant owners and managers is very, very difficult because they're running a business and they're just busy doing what they have to do, and they don't have the time to add something else to the plate. And unless they're willing and they're serious about keeping their restaurant clean, keeping the inspectors out of there, keeping that restaurant from showing up, from a client complaining about it and showing up on social media somewhere, getting shut down and being in the news. I've had one client that got shut down. He wasn't our client. He became our client after they shut him down. We went in, we cleaned it out, we got him open in about 3 days. It was pretty severe, and it took us about 3 days to get him open. But we got him open because every day you're shut down, you're losing thousands of dollars. Think about that. You're a restaurant owner, and you've been negligent about understanding, or negligent because you just didn't really care. I mean, it happens a lot in that industry. And I've been in the food service industry. I can give you a little bit of background. I was a restaurant manager. I've managed restaurant. I've managed food service. I've sold food distribution. I used to own a food distribution business. I used to service accounts with linen. So I used to do linen service for them. So I've been in the food service business a long time, and I understand it. I understand what goes on, what has to be done. I understand how to manage a restaurant. So when somebody tells me something can't be done because they can't do it, their people won't do it, they can't get their people to do it, I'm telling you that is just an excuse, because I know what it takes to shut a restaurant down at 10, 11 o'clock at night and spend an hour cleaning and making sure it's spotless for the next day. We turned tables. We moved tables over. We used to pull up chairs. We completely cleaned and degreased an entire kitchen every single night. As a matter of fact, one of the signs that your restaurant is not clean, if your vendors won't eat there, because the vendors get to see the back of your house. And sometimes you worry so much about the front of your house that you don't worry about the back because nobody's seeing it, but yet their vendors are seeing it. We had every single vendor in our restaurant eat there. And the food, it was a Mexican restaurant, so I understand about dealing with minority restaurants and how that can be very challenging because they have a different mindset about hygiene, sanitation, exclusion. It's a different mindset of somebody who understands the laws and maybe got into the restaurant business understanding, what all this is about. And even though it is supposed to be taught and you're supposed to be having, some type of training when you own a restaurant on food safety and hygiene and all that, a lot of the time the sanitation is only in the front of the house. And we see it all the time, guys. So you're not hiding anything from anybody. If you're out there and you have a restaurant, you're not hiding anything from anybody. Eventually it catches up with you. And the number one thing that I am fanatical about is an inspection. I do not take on any client. You shouldn't take on any client that's for a restaurant. Now, I understand there's a lot of people listening to me that work for large companies, and you're saying, Frank, I understand that you're telling me everything that you're telling me is true. Unfortunately, our company is never going to do that. We're about growth. We're about taking on accounts. We're about numbers. I get it. The big companies are about numbers. Everybody knows it in the industry. Everybody knows who works for a large company. You feel like everything is always just about numbers. But if you're an individual, and understand that an individual owner, an individual pest control company is going to provide you a superior customer service, is going to provide you a superior amount of control and attention to your restaurant that a large commercial company ever will. I had an account just recently that I had since I started in the business for about 10 years. They had a huge fly problem. I kept telling them the problem with your flies, and this has nothing to do with German roaches. I'm just letting you in on this. The problem with your flies that you guys have had is you've put in 4 restaurants in here. This is a gas station that has 4 restaurants in it, and it's very high-end gas station with 4 restaurants in it, but you're having these windows opening and closing all day long, and you need to install at least 5 or 6 lamps in here and then start making sure that that dumpster outside is clean. Well, for the longest time, they didn't do anything. That dumpster was dirty. Water was accumulating. You saw the breeding flies outside, and they wouldn't take care of that. And they just you just need to put more chemical in here. I said, there is no chemical I can put in a food service account that's going to control this amount of flies. I can't spray the walls with any product. They all have restrictions. This is one of the things you have to learn when you're getting into food service, that your label has a food service restriction on it, and you got to comply. And the customers don't understand this, that you just can't come in and spray stuff. So they started buying their own spray. They started buying, PT products and pressurized treatment products, and started spraying the inside of the restaurant, spraying the walls and spraying everything to control the flies. And I pretty much had to get on their case and say, I really can't do this if you guys are going to be doing this, because I'm not going to be putting my license on the line when somebody messes up. So these are things that people don't understand, that you just can't apply chemical in a restaurant the same way somebody sees you applying it at home. That's what the idea is. People come from GHP, General Household Pests, and then they jump into food service without any food service experience. And they're expecting to do the same thing, just baseboard spray everything, or, spray this. And you're limited to crack and crevice on most of the products. So an inspection, here's what I do with an inspection. Number one thing, you got to inspect that entire restaurant. And you're saying, what am I inspecting for when we already know they have German roaches? You're inspecting for 2 things. You're expecting to see what sanitation is actually there. When you're putting a light underneath and you're inspecting a restaurant and you're looking underneath all of the stoves, you're looking underneath all of the fryers. First of all, what kind of food service is it? Is it a Subway type of restaurant, a sub shop? Or do they have fryers? Do they have grills? Because that's going to be a lot more grease and a lot more problems than a sub shop that doesn't fry anything. That is, the most thing they can have is flour on the floor from baking. So you need to understand what type of food service account you're getting in. They're not all the same. And a full service sit down restaurant with grills and fryers that has, 5,000 square feet is a heck of a lot more service than a 1,500 square foot sub shop. Okay. So one of the things that you're looking at is how many square feet? Is it takeout only? Is it dine-in? Am I going to have, how much more am I going to have to treat? You're inspecting those fryers. You're looking at all the grease that's on the walls. How often are they really cleaning? How much stuff is accumulated in the corners underneath all that equipment? Food that falls down there that nobody cleans out. That's going to tell me how serious they are about sanitation. Is water being left overnight on all the floors? I do restaurants all the time that they pressure clean every night, and then they don't squeegee it out. They leave it wet, and they're leaving water all over this floor. That's going to contribute to a lot of pest problems, that you're going to be called out there constantly for this account, and do you want to take this account on? Okay? So you're looking for the sanitation. You're looking, is there clutter anywhere? Do they have everything a foot off the ground, away from the walls? Or is stuff piled in the back rooms, and there's boxes and boxes of stuff just being piled where you can't treat around it, you can't inspect, and you don't know if you can do your job because you can't see what's behind there. Who is providing, and I ask them all the time, where do you buy your stuff from? We've got distributors here in Miami that I wouldn't buy anything from, because I've had customers tell me I've bought a case of milk and roaches are coming out of the case of milk when I put it in my vehicle. And these are small restaurants that are going and buying what they need on a daily basis for some things, and then they're having everything else delivered to them. Where's the chain of custody? Do your suppliers have a chain of custody on the products? How do you know that you're not going to be getting, because remember, in food service, the dynamics are different. You got stuff coming in and out of that restaurant that you don't have in a home. You got thousands of products coming in on a monthly basis. You don't know where they're coming from. Do you see boxes of cardboard everywhere, laying everywhere inside that restaurant? Or are they taking the box and the cardboard out the moment the product and putting it in plastic bins, putting it on shelves? Or are they simply just using boxes and putting them everywhere? And you've got piles of cardboard, because what you got to remember about German roaches is they love to get into cracks and crevices. And one box has thousands of cracks and crevices where they can get into there and lay eggs. So now you have a box in the back that's been there for 5-6 years of product that nobody uses, and you can find roaches in there. So, the chain of custody of where they're buying is important. Understanding this. When you're talking to your client, you really have to, in the selling process, and this is what I talk about most of the time, because I come from a sales background. So everything to me is a sales process. I look at everything as a sales process. And when I'm talking to the client and I'm consulting the client on the issues and I don't do an inspection and say, I'll do an inspection, I'll tell you how bad the problem is. No. When I do an inspection, I want a manager with me. I want an owner with me. And I'm showing them every problem that they have and why they have that problem. See, if I'm doing a hair salon and there's a restaurant next door and I find German roaches, there's a whole lot of sealing that has to be done. There's a whole lot of void treatments that have to be done to keep that roach from coming over from that restaurant. I've had those before. I want to know the condition of the building. I want to know, because if you've got a complete, shopping center, and that shopping center owner is doing absolutely nothing to repair that shopping center and do exclusion, you could have American roaches and all kinds of insect problems coming in, and they wouldn't want you to cover everything. And the reality is that you can't cover everything under the sun. It's like buying health insurance. I want a pest control company that's going to cover everything. That's going to cost you as an owner, as a restaurant owner. And you got to understand that chemical isn't going to solve everything. So I'm looking for sanitation. I'm looking for cleanliness. I'm looking for how much amount of grease. I'm looking for water on the floor. I'm looking at the supply rooms. I'm looking at all of this when I'm doing and I'm having a manager with me. I'm having somebody that cares about that restaurant to understand why they have. And when I'm consulting them and I'm saying, look, a lot of this thing needs to get fixed. Do you think you can get this fixed so I can get you the control? Because chemical, and I tell them chemical is not going to. But my last company used to come in and spray everything. I said, that's illegal most of the time, because you don't have that many products, and this is why you have a roach problem. I had the last company for 6 years, and we've been battling this problem, and they never get rid of the problem. That's the problem. You got a company coming in and just spraying every month without inspecting, without dealing with all this. Nobody's ever told me any. I get that all the time. I've been in this restaurant now for 7 years. Nobody's ever told me any of this. I've had 3 companies, 4 companies, 5 companies. I said, you haven't had a real pest control company come in here that understands commercial food service, that understands what you're faced with. As a manager, when I go in and I pitch, I say, look, this is what I've done. This is what I accomplished. I understand what you're going through. I can sympathize with you. This has to be done. And unless I get a commitment from that manager, that owner, that this is going to get done, I'm an uphill battle every single month, because he's not going to change his habits. His people are not going to change their habits. And we have to go in, and they're going to be wanting a guarantee from us that we're going to solve the problem. It says, here's what and when they say, can you give me a guarantee? It says, without you fixing this, and this, you have no guarantee. I can't give you a guarantee. I go in and there's oil everywhere, because you got to understand a lot about pyrethroids. You're spraying pyrethroids where there's oil. It isn't going to work. That's a problem. So now we work on exclusion. It says, look at all these problems that you have here. All these holes coming in. I got to treat every single one of those holes, because look at the roaches coming out of the holes. And I have to show them. A lot of times you do inspections in restaurants and you're a sales guy doing an inspection. Most of the time you're not really a pest pro. You're not the technician that has to do the work. And you're not showing the client that says, look, when we come in here, this is going to be a 2-hour clean out. This is going to be a 3-hour clean out. This is going to be I've had 6-hour clean outs in a restaurant. By the time we're done with the follow-up, you're closed down and I got to come in at night and I got to go in and do a clean out. I'm going to spend 6 hours here. I got to come back the next day. Follow up. See if you can open. Put monitors everywhere and see if you can open. And if you can't open, and if I know that inspector is going to find a roach walking around here and he's not going to open you up, you're not going to get open. You need to understand that, Mr. Customer. Every day you're closed, you're losing hundreds of dollars and your reputation is on the line. This is what you need to do to make sure you stay open and you don't get shut down. And my number one job is to protect your butt. My number one job is to protect your brand. My number one job is not to come in here and spray. You got to understand that. That I'm saving your business. I'm saving your reputation. And if you won't listen to me, I'm the expert. And if you won't listen to me, you're going to be out of business. So you better take this seriously, because this is a problem. This is your problem. This is not my problem. The way I explain it is, you can't go to your doctor and tell your doctor, listen, doctor, I understand what you're telling me. I just want a pill for that. And the doctor says, you need to start exercising. You need to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop being up late at night, stop working 80 hours a week, get some exercise, and go get some rest. And unless you do that, there is no pill to fix you. I'm just keeping you alive temporarily. And I tell my customers that, and I hit them between the eyes, because you have to. They have to understand that a lot of the problems they're in, you're going to get calls. The amount of calls, nobody's ever going to call you if something is perfect. You're always going to get the call to bring on that new client because something has gone seriously wrong in their restaurant. I know how many people do I know that don't have pest control. They'll spend $150,000, $200,000 on a restaurant build out and not budget for pest control. They've never really run a restaurant and understand that they're thinking they're not going to get a bug. You're going to get a bug within 6 months of opening because of all the product that's coming in and out that you have no custody of control over. And you don't budget for pest control. Then you think it's going to cost you $65 a month like it cost in your house, where you have no dynamic and the guy's in there about 15, 20 minutes every time he goes, so 30 minutes. This is not going to cost you $65. And the problem is we got so many commercial companies out there selling price only that everybody thinks that pest control. I mean, I had a 6,000 square foot building with 3 stories. They were charging $125. We were at $375 a month with 2 visits. They were doing 1 visit and they were spending about 15, 20 minutes in there. Flies all over the place. American roaches all over the place. And when I tell them this is what they really have to spend to get it done, they're like, we're not going to spend that. Well, you're going to have the same problems you have now. Nothing's going to get changed. That's the reality of what's out there. So exclusion work has to be done. Things got to get sealed. Either you do it or I do it. Either you do it and you pay your staff to do it, or I do it and I bill you. The number one thing that we do in commercial restaurants is install on every new account was install thresholds on all the doors. It isn't going to get done. You're not going to get a guy to get a drill a hole through a steel door, and install sweeps or thresholds. You got to get those installed to stop mice, rats, and large roaches from getting in. So monitoring, exclusion work, and then monitoring. And one of the difficult things doing monitoring is that if you got a restaurant that's really busy, really wet all the time, they're constantly cleaning and hosing everything down like a lot of places do, which is the wrong thing to do. You don't have to hose down and pressure clean a kitchen every single time. and they're not using biodegradable products. They're not using biological products. They're using Clorox, and they're using a ton of product all the time. And they're spraying everything down. Trying to keep those monitors dry and trying to keep them safe is really difficult. But you got to get smart about where you're going to put those monitors, because that's your first line of defense. And I know there's a double-edged sword there, because you're saying, do I put monitors and then an inspector comes in and finds a roach and then wants to call us in? Well, I tell you what, if I'm in there twice a month, I guarantee you that for an inspector to find a roach, I'm going to find it before he does. We've had buildings where we've had restaurants where they've never had a German roach in a monitor for 8 or 9 years, because we're there like clockwork. And that's what it takes. So is this account going to require a once-a-month service? Or is it going to require a weekly service or a bi-weekly service? And is really the client really prepared for the cost of what they really want? So installing monitors, being able to understand where things are happening. Monitors are going to let me know if I got anything going in there, whether it's flies, whether it's a certain type of fly. A restaurant service without fly lights is crazy. That is just about the craziest thing I've ever heard. They won't spend $200-300 on good fly lights. But you'll spend $10,000 on a freezer build out, and then you'll buy $3,000 and $4,000 refrigeration units and not protect your investment by controlling flies and controlling everything. I mean, if you're not doing fly service when you're doing restaurant, you're shooting yourself in the head. You got to prepare for small flies. You got to prepare for roaches. You got to prepare for rodents. It is a totally different animal getting into the commercial side of things. And a lot of people are getting in and have no clue. They're thinking they're just going to go in and do it, and then they're just getting hit and hammered, and they don't want to do it anymore. Dumpsters, how far is that dumpster? That trash? 25 feet or 5 feet away from the building? Are they throwing out every piece of food at night, or are they leaving food in the garbage cans? You know how many restaurants I have that leave food overnight in their trash cans? And I said, you're kidding me. How am I ever going to get control of this? You guys leaving food here overnight. You got to find all this out in your initial inspection. And we have a huge report that we give every client every month, every time we go for every service, and we give them all the deficiencies. And we let them know, listen, this hasn't been fixed. You agreed to fix this. And if we're going to take you on as a client and put our reputation on the line for you, you need to get this fixed, because the last thing I want is somebody to see our vehicle parked in front of your store or in the back of your store and then going in and finding something and then saying that company stinks. I found a roach. So one of the other things you got to go in, we're getting into label requirements for food service. In most pest control labels, there's a food service, and most people have never read this. I get shocked how many people I talk to that don't read the food service requirements on most labels. And it says if food is being either stored here or prepared here or served here, then you are restricted to a crack and crevice and spot in this area. You can't just do a blanket baseboard spray or hose down the back of a cabinet. You're restricted to a crack and crevice. You don't own a crack and crevice, get one. So these are the challenges that you have. Now let's get into equipment that you're really going to need to get this done. My number one piece of equipment for German roaches is, if there's heavy infestation, is vacuuming. A vacuum is going to get 100% of those roaches out and remove them immediately, especially when you're doing cleanouts. The second thing that goes along with that, a lot of people like using pressurized treatment for doing for getting roaches out, and I prefer an air compressor. If you got a refrigeration unit or you got something that has German roaches in it, and you put that vacuum and you compress the air, those roaches are going to scatter and get out of it. They can't handle it. So you don't need pressurized, liquids to really get that and get it done. Air compressor is going to do a great job, especially in cracks and crevices and voids. You can air it in there and get those things out. A crack and crevice device like an AccuSpray or an AeroFog is going to be a great addition, if you don't own one, for doing this type of service. Definitely monitors. Whether you use pheromone monitors or you use regular monitors. You need to use monitors. That's our first line of defense, and we know what's going on. We also use the desec stations, and inside the desec station, these are made by Rockwell. You can put bait and monitors in there, and you can conceal them so nobody sees them. And you can glue this to a wall if you're using monitors so that you can protect your monitor from getting wet. So yes, you're going to spend a lot more for doing that, but it is well worth it if you're a serious practitioner. All right. So that is part of the cost of really doing food service. Roach gel baits, take your pick, whichever one you want to use, but you got to get off of that spraying mentality and start using targeted baits in areas where there's hot spots. And usually 1 to 5 feet from that area is suffice, but you really got to look at the labels, and which one you use. Liquids, I prefer to stay with non-repellents in food service. If I'm doing indoor, especially those that have lower label restrictions on them, you definitely need to get insect growth regulators, IGRs, and apply IGRs either on a 3-month or 6-month, 4-month, depending on the product and the label restriction. But you need to make preparation for doing an IGR service on a regular basis. And here's the thing. Most people have one service, and this is where I have a beef. You have one service that you sell and you use one product and you spray everything down. You're not doing inspections every single time. Every single time you do in a restaurant, you got to do a complete inspection. Depending how big that restaurant is, that's 15 to 45 minutes. Just that inspecting alone. And how does a client expect you to be there for 45 minutes and pay you the same just for inspecting that he would pay you for doing their house? It's insane. It can't be done. So IGRs, you need to have a program where you say, we're going to do on every 3 months, we're going to do an IGR service. Every 4 months, we're going to do an IGR service. Every so often, we're going to do our granular stations here, and we're going to do this and that, rodent stations. But you have to have a program of how you're going to rotate product and get things done and target it. It takes a lot more work. The use of borates in food service, a product, like Nibor D is a must if you're doing food service. For foaming drains, for treating drains, for mopping floors, for cracking crevice, for voids, borates are absolutely necessary for doing great, because it's another product you can add that it doesn't have a resistance that's going to give you a level of protection. So those are the things that you really have to look at for doing really good food service in commercial accounts and giving the client a quality service. If you're going in and you're doing a service without an inspection, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. You really need to invest a lot more time into inspection. It's not like you're doing an exterior service only. A lot of companies have done this. We do this. But it's a different mindset. You usually can't put your same technicians doing commercial accounts that are doing exterior only service. They don't have the patience, the training, or the discipline to do this kind of service. This is something that you need to get in there and start training a guy or training yourself to have that discipline. Understand that, you're going to be there twice a month for an hour. That's $250 a month easy. I don't know how commercial accounts, when you got residential at about $125 an hour, which is what it really costs, and then do commercial at $65 an hour. Since when is commercial in any business, whether it's electrical, whether it's mechanical, whether it's windows, whether it's equipment, it's a super premium because it is a specialized service that you're doing. And why in the world would anybody in their right mind offer a service for half the price with twice the work is beyond me. And that is what happens in food service. And that's why you can't find a lot of reliable companies that want to do it, because they say it's just not worth it anymore. So guys, this is what I have for you today. Brad, thank you so much for the request. Really do appreciate it. Appreciate the feedback. And guys, when this podcast goes on, hey, would you go on to the Pest Geek Podcast listeners group, comment on it, add anything that you think I missed. Tell me, hey, you should have talked about this. And maybe, 3-4 months down the line, we can do an update to this podcast and do something fresh with the information I missed. I greatly appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being with us. And I will have this podcast and see you tomorrow. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.